Our guest is Wright. He's the Pulitzer Prize-winning author, playwright, and staff writer for The New Yorker magazine. His recent works include the books Going Clear and The Looming Tower, and most recently the play Camp David. The play is about the Israel-Egypt Camp David Accords. It's now at Arena Stage in Washington through May 4th. Lawrence Wright, we're so excited to have you here. Camp David, Arena Stage, world premiere.
Right.
How's it going? How's it feeling?
It's great. It's the best theater experience I've ever had.
Oh, tell me how.
Well, for one thing, you know, it's very gratifying. The houses are full, the audiences are very warm, and the cast is adorable. They work together really well, and the director is, Molly Smith is great. So there's nothing, I haven't got any complaints. I feel, in a way, I'm finished writing it. I have, up until this week, I'd still been fiddling around. We added a new scene on Tuesday, but I'm done. You know, so
that's it. That's it.
Yeah. So we'll see where it goes from here.
Tell the folks the backstory of Camp David.
Well, Camp David, 1978 September. What you should know is that Anwar Sadat was the president of Egypt, and he had gone to Jerusalem. He had reached out his hand to the Israelis to try to make peace, and really not much had come from that. In the interim, Menachem Begin was the prime minister, and he was a very hawkish. You know, he'd always been on the margins of Israeli politics, and his whole career had been about expanding the land of Israel and creating, you know, making it fortified and strong. And the idea of making peace with Egypt and also with the Palestinians, which was a part of this, he was, in many ways, the least likely figure. Just think about today, too, Dennis.
Yes,
you know,
yes.
Anwar Sadat had been a Nazi collaborator. He had been an assassin. Begin had been a terrorist, responsible for the death of hundreds of people. So they had blood on their hands. And Carter was a failing president. So when people talk today about, you know, trying to find a partner for peace, look at these men. They made peace.
Yeah. So did President Carter have a goal in mind? Was it to try to negotiate some kind of an accord, or was it just to get them talking about peace?
No, he really wanted peace.
He did.
He had, he told me, you know, it was a very religiously motivated thing for him. He had been in the Holy Land. He was very touched by it. He thought that God had put him in office, and for a reason, and one of the reasons must be that he could make peace in the Holy Land. It was an incredibly ambitious and prideful thing to do. You know, the idea that he could, you know, the one-term governor of Georgia, pull off a peace treaty like this. And he wanted a comprehensive peace when he got in. And the accords really are, you know, there's two parts. Israel and Egypt make peace, and also there's a framework for making peace with the Palestinians. That part never has been implemented.
How many days? And
13.
And what were the good, 13 days?
13 days.
And what were the ups and the downs and the sideways?
Well, it was such an emotional thing, because originally Carter thought it was just going to last a couple of days, 4 or 5 at most.
Oh, okay.
And that's what they had budgeted. And so had the Israelis. You know, nobody thought that it was going to drag on for nearly 2 weeks. And that the President of the United States, not to mention the presidents of President and Prime Minister of 2 other countries, would be absent from the world scene for such a long time, while the, you know, prime rate was 20%, there were gas lines, you know, the Shah was about to fall. I mean, the world was trembling, and these guys disappeared behind these gates in this mountaintop in Maryland, and in what was, I think, a very quixotic attempt to actually bring peace to that region.
You are author, playwright, performer, a journalist, New Yorker. You know about contracts. You know about negotiations. There are always gives and gets. What were the gives and the gets at Camp David?
Well, Sadat came in hoping for one of two things. He wanted a peace, a comprehensive peace with Israel and with the Palestinians. And if that didn't work out, he wanted the U.S. to get on his side. He and Jimmy Carter were good friends. Carter used to say he loved Sadat. It's not normal diplomatic language. They were very close. And he thought if he could just get the relationship of the U.S. and Egypt, which had only recently established diplomatic relations, if he could make that look like the friendship he had with Jimmy Carter, then maybe they could edge Israel a little bit out of the picture. Begin came in not intending, he thought he could probably extract some kind of peace with Egypt, but he was perfectly willing to go there with getting nothing at all. He just didn't want to jeopardize Israel. Nobody in his delegation thought that he'd wind up returning Sinai Peninsula entirely to the Egyptians. So neither of these men had any intention of losing. But the thing about peace is that everybody has to lose something.
Yes.
That's why it's so hard and so rarely done. When I was researching this, I thought, why has this ever been done before? I thought that, you know, it seems like an extraordinary precedent. And one time that I can find in history, in 1905, Theodore Roosevelt brought emissaries from Russia and Japan who were in a war, and he took them to Portsmouth, Maine, and he got them to hammer out a peace agreement, and Teddy Roosevelt got the Nobel Prize for that, the first American president to do so. But that was it. I mean, there was one other instance in the 15th century when the Pope divided the New World and the Old World between Spain and Portugal. But he drew a line on the globe. But his globe.
Yours? That's yours?
Yeah, but it turned out that Brazil stuck out a little further than he thought, and so that's why they speak Portuguese in Brazil to this day. But those are two examples that I've been able to find in all of history where something like this took place.
Let me ask you a little bit about the cast of the performance. There's just, what, 4 or 5 people in the cast?
There are 4 people.
4 people in the cast. So it would be President Carter, Mrs. Carter, President Sadat, and Prime Minister Begin. Who are the actors?
Well, first of all, I'm really blessed. I feel like I'm dazzled by the cast. Richard Thomas plays Jimmy Carter, and one of the things that's interesting about Richard, he was playing John Boy in the Waltons, which was the most popular show during the Carter era. I tease him by saying that he could have gotten elected more easily than Jimmy Carter because everybody knew and loved John Boy. And Mrs. Carter is played by Hallie Foote, Tony-nominated actress whose father was Horton Foote, a great playwright. And then Ron Rifkin, who won a Tony in Cabaret, is playing Menachem Begin. He grew up Orthodox Jewish in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and so he's intimately familiar with Yiddish, and there's a lot of Hebrew and so on in the play. And then for Anwar Sadat, we have Khaled El-Nabawi. He's an Egyptian movie star. He's like Brad Pitt in Cairo. I mean, this is
what a cast.
He turned down 3 series to come do this show here in Washington. And they're all magnificent, and you know, the dynamics between these actors is so electric, and I think it is so close to what must have really been like.
Wow. Let me take a little break. I'm sorry that you all are not here in Washington, D.C. Arena Stage, one of the great theaters here, and as Lawrence has referenced, Molly Smith's great artistic director. They're doing a kind of a President series, and this is part of that President series. Lawrence Wright is our guest. Take a little break. Back on the other side. Playwright, author, 8 books, just astounding career. We'll pick it up on the other side. This is America and the World. This is America is brought to you by the National Education Association, the U.S.-China Education Trust, and the F.Y. Chang Foundation. The League of Arab States, representing 350 million people in 22 member countries. The Rotendaro Family Trust. The Embassy Series, uniting people through musical diplomacy, presenting international artists in diplomatic settings. The Republic of Kazakhstan in the heart of Eurasia, a rich history, a culture of hospitality, and a future of development and growth. And Ventana Productions, television facilities, editing and distribution services. Lawrence, when did the idea of journalism and theater and history all kind of coalesce in your mind, and where has it led you?
Well, I went to a show at the Public Theater in New York in 1992 by Anna Devere Smith. It was called Fires in the Mirror. Mm-hmm. And she's a wonderful actress, but there was a Crown Heights tragedy, you may recall.
Yes.
It was an incident between Orthodox Jews and black community. And she went out and interviewed all these people and then and tape recorded them and then enacted them on stage. And I was galvanized. I thought, I didn't know you could marry journalism and theater. And yet she did it. And so it was in my mind. Then when I finished writing The Looming Tower, the book about Al-Qaeda.
Boy, what a book about Al-Qaeda.
Sorry?
I said, boy, what a book about
Al-Qaeda.
Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
Time magazine called it one of the top 100 nonfiction books of all time.
I was very, very gratified by that.
Yes.
But I had finished the book, and so many people had asked me what was it like to, talk to these people, and I remembered that experience of seeing Anna's work on stage, and I thought maybe I should do it as a one-man show.
Yes.
And a way of talking to people about the experience of engaging with radical Islam, and also the effect of that attack that it's had on our country.
So you had the research, you had traveled, you had done the research, so we had something to go from. But then you became a performer. How does that feel on stage?
Well, I'm glad I got real actors now. I did two one-man shows, and I really enjoyed it. And I think it helped me understand the craft of playwriting and also what actors need. But I'm much happier to have real professionals up there.
What do actors need?
Well, they need to have a sense of motivation. When words come out of their mouth, they want to know why they said those words. And then they also need to understand how it registers, what other people are saying, how they react to it. A lot of what I'm doing is simply trying to craft the scene and tell, this scene leads to this scene and this scene. For the actor, the scene doesn't lead anywhere. It is a universe of its own. You don't, in the theory that the actor tries to get into, you don't know where we're going to go from here. You have to live in the moment. And it's all about creating character and how they would react to the information and the action that's taking place. And if you have really wonderful actors, they can help you. They can give you a lot of feedback, and it makes your job as a playwright a lot easier. They
say that the performer, and you've been on both sides of the footlights, can sense the audience and how they're reacting to the play on a given night. Do you, as you're sitting in the back row and observing Camp David at Arena, sense the difference on a given night and how that may affect the actor?
Yeah, it's part of the alchemy of theater is,
It's happening live.
It's happening right
now.
But you know who the audience is almost as a character within the first 30 seconds of the play. There are a couple of lines that are moderate laugh lines at the beginning. And if this is an audience that is really cheerful, or really young, or really drunk because it's after dinner, or you just have a sense almost immediately of how the whole audience reaction is going to happen during the course of the play. But also, it's like a play has to float above, and it's the audience that gives it the air underneath it to remain afloat. If the audience isn't there, it just sinks and sinks and sinks.
Wow.
Here, the audiences are so smart, and they're really responsive.
Texas background, Dallas. Dad was a banker.
Right.
A couple of sisters.
Yeah, you've done your research.
Thank you very much. Tulane.
Yeah.
How did you end up in Cairo?
Well, I was a conscientious objector. This was Vietnam era, and I got out of college and...
Problems with your dad over Vietnam?
You really done your research, Dennis. Yes, we had... There was a generational war going on back then, and my dad had been a war hero in World War II in Korea, and I was in ROTC. I wanted to be like him, but it was a really difficult political time, and I finally decided, you know, that I on moral grounds, I couldn't go to Vietnam. And so I applied to be a conscientious objector, and not really expecting that they would give it to me, and they did. But I had to do 2 years of alternative service. So I had to, you know, it had to be for low pay, 50 miles from home, and in the interest of the United States. So I went to the UN thinking I'd get a job far, far away, and they said no. But here's a list of American institutions abroad. One of them was across the street. There was an office for the American University in Cairo at 866 UN Plaza. So I walked across the street, not knowing we didn't have diplomatic relations with Egypt. There were only 200 Americans in the whole country. We were trying to run this university, and I don't think I even knew what language they spoke. But 30 minutes later, they said, "Can you leave tonight?" And I said, "No, I can't leave tonight. My girlfriend, I haven't told my parents, you know, can you leave tomorrow?" "Sure, I'll go tomorrow." So I rushed back to Boston, packed, called my parents from Kennedy, flew to Cairo, taught my first class at 9 the next morning.
Wow. What was your dad's reaction? What was mom's reaction when you gave them that news?
They were surprised, but they also knew that, well, the whole country was in a crisis. It wasn't just our family, but our family had been through a lot. And the wars between my father and I think they were grateful that at least that part had come to a halt. We reconciled, and I loved that man. But you know, we had different worldviews. And but you know, being away in Egypt for 2 years, I would never have written this movie called The Siege with Bruce Willis and Denzel Washington, and I would never have written this play. You know, there are things that came out of that experience that have formed the rest of my life.
I was thinking of your career as a journalist, Nashville and Atlanta, excuse me, and also Rolling Stone, New Yorker, and but Dallas is still a big piece of who you are, huh?
Texas and Dallas have very strong cultural imprints. And,
don't mess with.
And it says something about me that I still live in Texas.
What does it say?
You know, I'm fond of this state. I love Austin. It's a state that you know, it has a real culture. It's very distinctive. It's a little bit like there are few places in the country, if you see a movie, you know you're in New York, or you know you're in Hollywood, or someplace like that, but you know you're in Texas. And there's a lot of reinforcement that you get there. I'm also in a band.
Yes, you are.
So the music plays a role.
You're a keyboard?
I'm a keyboard player. And so, you know, there's a lot of, we have dear friends in Austin and raised our kids there. So there's Glue.
What's the name of the band?
Hoodoo, W-H-O-D-O.
And what kind of music you play?
It's blues and rockabilly.
Yeah. Did you have musical heroes when you grew up?
You know, when I was a kid in the late 50s and early 60s, there was a radio station, WRR, and at night they played this, after midnight, Cat's Caravan, K's instead of C's.
Okay.
And they played race music. And so
definition of race music?
Black music, the music that wasn't on the white channels. And a couple of buddies and I, we would drive around like most adolescent boys aimlessly, you know, listening in the middle of the night to these songs. And they ranged from, you know, Lead Belly to Little Richard, and but they were electrifying. And then I went to school in New Orleans, and the New Orleans music really captivated me. Professor Longhair and Ernie Cato and Irma Thomas and people like that. It was great, you know. So but I wasn't a musician. That came later in life.
I was thinking about the book that you wrote about growing up in the 60s and through the 80s.
In the New World.
In the New World. And I was thinking of your vantage point. You see the America and you see the world from a very unique vantage point through your travels, through your writing. How do you see, I was thinking of, you started that book with a couple of quotes, one from Nixon and one from Kennedy.
Right.
And it's talking about a new world. Do you see a new world? Do you see a new America now?
Well, we're constantly evolving as a country and a culture, but you know, one thing that occurred to me recently when, you know, here I'm writing about Jimmy Carter, and he seems to be having some kind of resurgence, you know. It's not as if, you know, this is his like 28th book. It's not like he hasn't tried to be noticed again, but suddenly people seem responsive to hearing who he is again. And in retrospect, you know, he seems like an artifact from another era. But at the same time, if you look back at his presidency, the problems that he was dealing with are right back on our table. And it's as if we've taken a long parenthesis. And so, you know, it seems odd. There's a similarity between the problems that he has and the problems that Obama has. But there's the same problems the whole country and the whole world are dealing with.
You remember Ronald Reagan said it's morning in America? From your point of view, what time is it?
You know, I think more internally in terms. I think that we are in a different space than we were when Jimmy Carter was president. There's no question about it. And then, you know, he was president when the Cold War was still going on. You think about when I was young. I you know, grew up in the southern state. And to have a black man be president, you know, unthinkable. I thought the world would always be divided between the U.S. and the Soviet Union until we nuked each other into oblivion. And now the Soviet Union is gone. The apartheid, it's also been erased. The tyrants of the Arab world, despite all the turmoil they're going through, they're being rolled aside one by one. So the world has changed, but what's frustrating is that the Middle East is still dealing with the same problem. I'm the same age as Israel. I was born in 1947 when it was declared to be a partition. It didn't come into being until 48. And so I've seen in my lifetime how history can change and evolve, and also, in my opinion, in these examples, evolve for the best. You know, we're a much better country and a better world than we were when I was a young man.
So you see America growing up, huh?
I do, but I don't, you know, especially the race issue. You know, I think that, you know, I'm so glad that we did so much hard work on race. It's not resolved entirely, but it's an unrecognizable country to a white Southern man.
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, just to have black people in, not just in public office, but in public restaurants. I mean, you know, when I was a kid, that wasn't the case. And I began my career working for the Race Relations Reporter in Nashville, and so I was privileged to cover the civil rights movement and still stand in awe of the nobility of that effort.
We are coming to the end of our time, and I just want to make sure that the folks at home know we've been talking to the playwright of world premiere Camp David. It's now at Arena Stage here in Washington, D.C. It runs through May 4th. So if you can, if you're interested in history, if you're interested in what happened then, President Carter, the bringing together of Begin and Sadat, and fashioning a peace as we look at Israel-Palestine today, or we look at what's happening in the Middle East, we want to encourage you just to get there and see a marvelous play. Lawrence, thank you so much for being with me.
I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. For information about my new book, The Chance of a Lifetime, and online video for all This Is America programs, visit our website, thisisamerica.net. And now you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. This Is America is brought to you by the National Education Association, the U.S.-China Education Trust, and the F.Y. Chang Foundation. The League of Arab States, representing 350 million people in 22 member countries. The Rotendaro Family Trust. The Embassy Series, uniting people through musical diplomacy, presenting international artists in diplomatic settings. The Republic of Kazakhstan, in the heart of Eurasia, a rich history, a culture of hospitality, and a future of development and growth. And Ventana Productions, television facilities, editing and distribution services.